Hello friends and welcome to my garden walk and talk video. For those of you that are new here, my name is Hila and I garden in a medium-sized garden in West Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. The soil is predominantly a clay soil. I can't quite remember what USDA number it is, but I will find out and let you know on the next walk and talk garden video. There is a lot going on in the garden at the moment. So the kids recently transplanted their seedlings into the raised beds, which is where we're starting off from. And basically we forgot to put on some slug repellent, and something like 80% of the purple sprouting broccoli was chewed up, as well as something like 50% of the carrots and all the other things. So we've had to remedy the situation. But if we turn over to the left over there, there is this bay leaf tree that has just grown mental. When I got that and planted it, it was only a foot tall, and it basically has to be moved because it's just gone absolutely mental. The other raised beds in the vegetable garden have got onions from last year that we're hoping to be able to harvest very soon. Now over here is my Clematis, good old Nelly Moser, which I absolutely love. I've been trying to get this Clematis to bloom now for nearly 3 years, and this is the first time it's really shown its full potential. So it's a 3-year-old one, and it's doing quite well on this trellis that I moved here 2 years ago. And unfortunately, the rose, the Zephyrin Druhin, is not doing very well. I'm going to try and remedy it with some manure and mulching. Last year, this time it was flowering, but this time there's not even a single bud, and I'm not too sure what's going on there. So as we go up the flower walk here, you can see there's some bluebells in the grass underneath the trees, and these need deadheading. They've gone now, the bluebells. I don't have any at the moment, and if I don't deadhead them, they don't come back as strong the next year. This little slash rockery section is something that I'm still working on. It's a little bit of a hot mess, but it has some really beautiful Aquilegia, and there's 2 alliums in there that I didn't even realize I'd put in, and this is the first year they've come out. The forget-me-nots are kind of fading out now, and I have this really lovely hardy geranium. I bought this last year from B&Q, and so this is its first proper year. I just have to make sure that it doesn't get overwhelmed by the nasturtiums, which are beginning to germinate from the seeds. And this yucca plant, it needs some renovation, and I started the renovation of it last year, cutting back some major branches, and hopefully we'll get something sorted out. I love this white geranium. It's a hardy geranium. It's getting swamped out by the roses over here. I have this really lovely pink standard rose. This one came with the house, so I don't actually know what it is called, but it's got some leaves that are a little bit poorly and they need to be sorted. And then there's those lime green weeds that are growing in the background. Those are weeds, very prolific at self-seeding. I just haven't had time to get in and get at them, but I do like the contrast of the lime green with the purple aquilegias. I have this variety of aquilegia called Barlow, and this is its 2nd year. I bought these 2 years ago as bare roots from J. Parker's, and they've been doing quite well. It was quite lucky that they turned out to be purple, and this section of the garden, I'm sort of trying to make it a purple, pink, and blue section. These Canterbury bells have just gone really massively in flush and are taking over this area, and once they flower they will go so nicely with this wild geranium that I have here. And this is such a great plant for dry areas, because this section here where I have the eunomai and the pieris and the ferns, it's quite a dry area, so I've put in plants that I think will do well in drier areas, but quite nice and sheltered. The pieris, I transplanted that from one of the main flower beds to the side because it had just grown too tall, It's been in this spot now for its second year, and we'll see if it's fitting in. But I'm quite happy with how this area is coming along, because I've got the pinks from the geraniums, and then I have the pinks from the saxifraga. I have some more geraniums that I divided from another part of the garden, and I put them here because they grow into these really lovely clumps. And I did that because the other side of the steps, after my husband had built the steps with the wall, that side looked sort of ugly because it had a lot of cabling, and the geranium have just covered that up beautifully. As you can see there, forget-me-nots are really getting not quite as fresh. They're past their freshness, and I will need to be picking those out. The Aquilegia over here going really strong, as well as the alliums. I love the alliums. These were some things that I've started putting in since 3 years ago. I started off with the Globe Master, which is the super tall one. It's nearly 4 feet tall. And when I bought it, I had 3 bulbs, but now I have 4. So it's quite exciting that it's multiplied. And then I have this really awesome Aquilegia plant that my neighbor gave to me, but I don't know what its name is. It's a yellow one, and I think it pops beautifully against the alliums. The types of the shorter alliums that I have are called Purple Sensation, and I planted those last year, and they've come out quite beautifully. Within there is some Echinacea and Rudbeckia coming up, but I'll be looking forward to that more in the summer. The grass needs to be mowed. It's just been crazy. We've had some very hot temperatures here of about 24 degrees Celsius, which is quite unusual for May. And I have a wildflower area here, not intentionally, but it's a bit of a hot mess that needs basically to be dug up and grassed over so I can create symmetry with the other side of the step. I have here totally tangerine guam, which has just grown so well. It's been there for 2 years now, and this thing has grown massive, but it seems to clash with the purples that are accidentally coming up on this section of the flower. So these alliums, I planted these last autumn, and these bearded irises have just been so beautiful. This is the first year that they've had a really full on bloom. I got these from my neighbor, so I'm not too sure what they're called, but when she gave them to me, it was one plant, and they've multiplied. And at the bottom, I have sedum, which is more of a fall autumn plant, but it has really lovely foliage. And I've been very impressed with the alliums, and I think I'll need to add some more to this section. The hellebore finished flowering after it flowered during January and February in winter, and it was really lovely, but now it's developing these very interesting looking seed pods. I also have next to the geranium these really interesting architectural irises. I'm not a big fan of them, but one of the reasons why I keep them around is because the snails and the slugs love them, and so it's a good way of me to manage the pest control. But otherwise, I do find that they spread far too quickly, and I have to be very much on top of them. There's another hot mess behind here where there's a rose that I planted out last year called Rosa mutabilis. I believe it's also called Chinese rose, but it's just been buried with a lot of weeds. And this area is, I guess it's like my Monica's closet of the garden. It just needs a lot of work, and in and amongst all of the stuff that's going on in here, I also have a clematis somewhere tucked in over there. And then I have a lady's mantle, which again, I like it, but I think it is in the wrong place. I need to move it over to a shaded part of the garden. So this section here, it does get a lot of sun because it's in the main part of the garden, which is south facing. Just by the apple tree, we have a trellis, and on the trellis is a clematis that I planted about 6 years ago. And when I got it, it was a very small, only a few inches tall, but it seems to be establishing. And I think that this is the year that it's finally going to bloom. So I have a lot of creeping buttercup in my garden. It's one of my worst weeds that I have to keep on top of. And that's what you can see over there where it needs to be dug up. And the peonies are coming along. So in a few weeks, we should have the big bright magenta. This is a perpetual sunflower plant, so it's not as big as the traditional sunflower. It's a little bit slenderer and smaller, but it lasts throughout the year. And then the angelica has been self-seeding, and those things are just going to grow massively tall, nearly 6 feet tall, and provide really a lot of interest all through into autumn. Over by the pond path, I have the saxifraga in flower as well, and it's very pretty and dainty. The water lilies are beginning to rise up, so when they go into a hibernation of sorts, they sort of sink to the bottom of the pond, and then when the water gets warmer and we head towards summer, they begin to rise up onto the pond surface, and we know that summer is nearby. I recently acquired this garden statue from an auction, and I love it. It's 2 mandarin ducks with their 2 babies, and I love mandarin ducks because they mate for life. So I think that they're such a great symbol of marriage relationships, and so I just thought it was really perfect for the pond. I have loads more wild geranium along the north-facing side of the house, and it does really well. So wherever I'm in doubt about whether there's enough sunlight, I normally will just divide the geraniums and just put them in. And so even amongst the rocks that lead up to the pond, I have it there. And the area around the pond has been infested by this weed that I just showed you over there, which looks like a fern. I planted golden showers rose on this side of the house, but it really hasn't done well. As you can see, it's scraggly. I'm going to try this year to feed it and to mulch it and just to give it a bit more TLC and see what's what with that. The other day, I put out the dahlias from the greenhouse, and I've been hardening them off, getting ready to plant them in. I've also been pinching the ends to encourage bushier growth. The ones that have survived being eaten by snails and slugs, I'm hoping it means they will do well. And I also have some pink heuchera. I don't know the name of these because I got these from my neighbor, and I have them there waiting to get planted out. And I have a honeysuckle plant over across from my greenhouse, which needs a major tidy up. And then further along, this is the latest section of my garden that I've actually done anything with. And I've set this up to be a shady border. I bought this Acer tree, a Japanese maple tree, the other day, and I'm sort of trying it out in different spots to see where it might work well, whether it would do well with the bergania and the ferns. So this section here is mostly going to be ferns, so a lot of really greenery area, so to speak, but it's still a work in progress. I have a lime green eunomai over there, which does provide a lovely contrast for a lot of the foliage. I was trying to create a section with hostas, but they've been horribly misplanted because they need to be at the front of the border rather than the back, so I'll be fixing that very soon. And there's more wild geranium here, and this spot, it hardly gets any sun, but as you can see, you have some lovely pink blooms. It's not as many blooms as when they're in the sun, but even in the shade, they will still provide some color and interest, and that section is also dry, but they do quite well. This is the mine that the kids started digging when we moved into this house about 8 years ago. And my Clematis, my Guernsey cream, it seems to be struggling all of a sudden, and I need to figure out why. I planted that one out last year. All this past week, I've been working on digging out tree stumps, and this is one of the tree stumps that needed to be dug out. Apparently, the house used to be surrounded by these gigantic conifers, and I have next to it another Acer plant that I planted 7 years ago when we moved in, so it's quite a slow growing one. And this is another section that I've been working on recently, and so I've plugged in some of the wild geraniums or hardy geraniums. I keep calling them wild, but they're more hardy geraniums. That is to say that they survive dry conditions and colder conditions than the normal geraniums that you would see. So as you can see, my bluebell glade is completely gone now. We just have some little bits and bobs of forget-me-nots, and the foxgloves are coming in, as well as the aquilegia. So over summer, that's what is going to hold the interest in that area. And when we move over here to this part of the garden, which is where the red brick wall is, it's a bit quiet on this front, really. The clematis hasn't flowered yet. I've got two clematis either side of the protruding pillar, and I'm hoping that they will flower for the first time this year. I planted them 2 years ago. The only thing that's really doing anything over here is this erismum or mauve's ball, which is just really beautiful pink. The strawberries are doing very well, so we're expecting a bumper harvest of strawberries this year if we can protect them from the birds, as well as the blueberries, which are planted in tubs. And we brought these ones from our old house as well, and so they've been doing quite well, but they do require a lot of watering, especially in summer. Over on the east facing side of the garden, I also have some more hardy geraniums, and these ones have magenta flowers once they come into play, and that's where I put my Madame Alfred Carrier climbing rose, which is in its fourth, I want to say, no, third, no, it's in its third year now, and I have a few blooms and quite a lot of buds. And then over here I have my disastrous dahlia adventures, wherein I planted them far too soon and I forgot to put slug repellent, and most of them have just been chewed up and eaten up by slugs and snails, and they're completely gone. There is a clematis along here, not well placed because it's not blooming at the same time as the rose, but I'll sort that out. And these are hardy geraniums. They're all in pots, but they've just grown and flopped over, so it doesn't even look like they're in pots because you can't see the pots now. So it's really quite lovely because it adds a little bit more height in the garden. And I have some aquilegias that have just seeded themselves on this section of the house, unplanned but very beautiful purples. And then we come to the front door, wherein I'm very happy with how this is turning out because I've used some hosters in pots on either side of the door, and the Guernsey cream clematis is blooming beautifully. Well, friends, thank you so much for joining me in my weekly garden talking tour. It's been a lot of fun to do, and I hope that you also enjoyed walking along the garden with me. Until I see you next time, I wish you blue skies, health, and happiness. Bye.